My husband left me to be with my mom, thinking she'd inherit everything. But when he found out that I got everything instead, he came back begging for forgiveness. Hi, I'm in a tough spot right now because of my unstable mother and my soon-to-be ex-husband, who have teamed up to ruin my peace of mind just for their own selfish reasons. I wish I could talk about this with my friends, but it feels too personal and embarrassing to discuss with anyone I know in real life. Trust me, you'll understand why when I tell you what I'm going through. I don't have much family to talk to, so I can't turn to them either. So I'm here on Reddit to get this off my chest and to make sure I'm not the bad guy, like they're making me feel. This all started just 2 weeks ago when, out of the blue, my husband of 3 years, let's call him Kevin, told me he wanted to break up because he developed feelings for my mom. Yes, you read that right, and no, I'm not joking. Believe me, I was just as shocked and definitely more disgusted when he confessed that he'd been having an affair with her for 3 months. I never noticed because I've been busy with work, and his behavior never seemed suspicious enough for me to catch on. For context, my mother is just 20 years older than I am. I'm 27 and my mother is 47. She had me while she was in college, but my dad was never in the picture. He broke up with her the day she told him she was pregnant, and even tried to convince her to terminate the pregnancy. But she wanted a reason to drop out of college back then, so she decided to have me anyway and told my grandmother she wanted to be a single mom. My grandparents were wealthy enough to support her, but they weren't happy about her dropping out of college. They tried to get her to go back after I was born, but she refused. Instead, she tried out different professions before settling on interior decoration. She's not an interior designer, she doesn't create designs but advises people on where to place their furniture and how to decorate their rooms to look nice. It's a service for wealthy people, and she's quite good at it. She's not a qualified professional, but my grandpa, who was a well-known realtor, helped her get jobs. My mom is the flakiest, most unreliable person I've ever known, and she's really lucky she came from a wealthy family, or she'd be out on the streets. My grandparents practically raised me because my mother never had enough time for me. If she wasn't busy with work, she was busy socializing. When I was a kid, I actually used to think my grandparents were my real parents and my mom was my older sister or something. That's how my childhood was, and by the time I hit my teens, I had no expectations from my mother because she was still as carefree as ever. My grandpa passed away when I was in 7th grade, and from then on, it was just me and my grandmother against the world, including my mom, because most of the time she was a total pain to deal with. If you ever have to explain to your mother, as a 15-year-old, why it's a bad idea for her to go to Iceland with a guy she met on Tinder just 2 days ago, then you'd understand what my teen years were like. She's completely irresponsible and doesn't care how her actions affect others, even her own family. My grandma always told me I was on my own after she passed because my mother would never be any help. So I worked really hard to secure my future, and now I'm the COO at my company, earning twice as much as Kevin. He's the head of sales at a smaller firm, but I never judged him for it or made him feel inferior. This is partly because I graduated from one of the best business schools in the state and interned at my current company, thanks to my grandma's connections. She taught me to be humble, unlike Kevin and my mother, who act like they're big stars over things they haven't even achieved yet. I met my husband at a mutual friend's birthday party about 5 years ago, and we hit it off right away because we had a lot of common interests. We dated for 2 years, and when he proposed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. He seemed like a good man back then. He would often joke about how my mom was hot, which, to be fair, she is by typical beauty standards. I wouldn't call her hot because she's crazy and she's my mother, but I can't deny that she looks good for her age. She's made a lot of money by convincing people that her so-called feng shui decor works, and she's spent a lot of that money on makeup and Botox, so naturally she's attractive for her age. I don't mean to demean actual, professionally trained decoration specialists. Real feng shui might work, but whatever my mother does is a scam because she literally knows nothing about it. I respect the people who actually know what they're doing, but since my mom isn't one of those professionals and she's also a generally crappy person, I think I'm allowed to speak badly of her. I thought Kevin would be different from the other men I dated in the past and that I could trust him, but that turned out to be wrong too. He would joke about how my mother was hot enough to pass as my sister. Despite my strained relationship with her, I'd laugh it off because no one would imagine that something like this could actually happen to them. I only kept in touch with my mother because of my grandma. She made me who I am, and I'll always be grateful for that, even though it meant dealing with her crazy daughter. Grandma never gave up on my mom because she was a good woman who loved her despite all her flaws. But my mom could never love me more than she loved herself, no matter how much effort I put in. Even after Grandma passed away almost a year ago, I still tried to keep in touch with my mom. Our relationship was bad, but I looked out for her more out of a sense of duty to Grandma than for her sake. That all ended when Kevin told me about the affair 2 weeks ago. He sat me down after I returned from a business trip, and, with a straight face, told me he was in love with my mother and that they wanted to be together. I thought he was joking at first and laughed, but for the first time, he didn't laugh. He then detailed how he and my mom had been fooling around behind my back for 3 months. It started after Kevin and I had a silly fight, and my mom texted him for advice on fixing her headphones. They started talking, and over time, it turned into something more. They hadn't planned to take it that far, but it just happened, and they couldn't help themselves. I'm sure Kevin didn't mind that my mother looks a lot like me. I kicked him out that very night, and he left without much fuss because he knew he could go to my mother's place instead. That night, I finished an entire bottle of wine while crying like a baby. I was up until the early hours of the morning, sobbing so hard that my eyes swelled up. Around 4:30 in the morning, unable to deal with the overwhelming anger and pain, I decided to text my mother. I was drunk, which probably pushed me to send that text. I called her a lot of names and told her she was a terrible daughter to Grandma, a terrible mother to me, and was only getting worse with age. I said she was a con artist at best, and once her Botox and fillers wore off, Kevin would see her for the ugly person she truly was and dump her too. I didn't expect her to respond, but she did, and her response was eye-opening. She said she might lose her looks one day, but she'd never lose her bank balance, which was about to increase tenfold thanks to Grandma's will. I had totally forgotten about that while grieving Grandma. Her lawyer had told us we'd be informed of what exactly she'd left us after the probate period, which takes 6 to 9 months, had passed. It had already been 7 months, so we were expecting to hear from him soon. Grandma had instructed her lawyer not to inform us of what to expect until the probate period ended. The only thing we were told was where she wanted to be buried. Neither my mother nor I knew what she had left us, but since she had a lot of money, assets, and property, we were expecting a lot. Or rather, my mom was, because all I cared about when Grandma passed away was that she was gone, and I was truly on my own. The contents of her will didn't matter to me much because I value relationships more than money. But evidently, Kevin did, which is why he chose my mom over me. Both of them expected her inheritance to be greater than mine. They must have been pretty confident about it, too, because the way my mother bragged about it made it seem like she'd already heard back from the lawyer and knew what she was going to inherit before I did. Anyway, I didn't reply to her text and tried to push it out of my mind. The next day, I spoke to my lawyer and told her I wanted to file for divorce as soon as possible. Within a week of Kevin's confession, I'd filed for divorce, and he'd been served. Now we just had to wait for it all to be over so he could live out the rest of his days with my ex-mother-in-law. But something amazing happened, and I truly have to thank Grandma for it because even though she's gone, she still has my back. I'd asked Grandma's lawyer, the executor of the will, to inform us separately because I couldn't bear to be in the same room as my mother and Kevin. 5 days ago, she told me that my mother had already been informed of what she'd inherited, and now it was my turn. I visited her with no expectations because I really didn't know what to expect. But when I left, I was probably the happiest person on the planet at that moment. I'd inherited all of Grandma's money, assets, and property, while my mother got nothing but a diamond ring and matching earrings that Grandma used to wear. That's all she got. Apparently, Grandma left everything to me because she had taken care of my mom her whole life. But now that my mom was almost 50, Grandma felt she was old enough to take care of herself. So ironically, Grandma, who always said I'd be on my own after she passed away, made sure I was independent enough not to rely on my inheritance. And the one person who had always counted on Grandma her whole life was left with nothing. So really, she was the one who was on her own. It was karma at its finest, and I've never felt as justified as I did in that moment. My mom found out just an hour before I did, but after that, I didn't know what would happen. I was excited because I knew that even if my mom didn't try to contact me, Kevin surely would. And he did. He could have waited it out for appearance's sake, but he had no patience. He texted me the next day, saying he had made a huge mistake and wanted to come back to me if I'd still have him. He said he and my mom were never meant to be, and spending those few days with her made him realize how good he had it with me. So now he'd come to his senses and wanted to give our marriage a second chance. I couldn't help but laugh when I read Kevin's feeble attempt at reconciliation. They probably had no clue that I knew my mother had barely inherited anything, and there was no huge windfall to look forward to anymore. After a whole day of thinking about how to respond to Kevin, I finally sent him a clown emoji and then blocked him. I was also pretty sure he hadn't come clean to my mom, so just to be sure, I took a screenshot of his text and sent it to her with 3 clown emojis. Then I turned off my phone because I didn't want to deal with any drama. Instead, I decided to watch Netflix and enjoy my night without letting Kevin or my mother bother me anymore. The next morning, I heard about the aftermath of my text from my mom's next-door neighbor's daughter, who's a friend of mine. My mom still lives in the house I grew up in. My grandpa left that house to his wife and daughter, so after Grandma passed away, my mom stayed there. The neighbor's daughter told me that around 10 o'clock, she started hearing a lot of yelling from my mom's place. But nobody checked because they knew what kind of person my mom was and didn't like her much. Then suddenly there was screaming, and that's what finally got their attention. My mother went completely crazy and physically kicked Kevin out of the house. He ended up lying on the pavement while my mom threw all sorts of things at him and yelled the most horrible, disgusting things. Kevin screamed because she grabbed a hardcover book and threw it at him, and unfortunately, it hit him right in the forehead. When the neighbors found him, he was already bleeding, trying to stop it with his hand. The wound was deep, and he had to get 5 stitches, which was really shocking to hear. He also pressed charges against my mother. She only had to pay a hefty fine because it was considered a misdemeanor, but it was still scary because Kevin was seriously hurt. She didn't mean for him to get so hurt, and she wasn't in her right mind at the time, so the cops went easy on her. Plus, she had a good lawyer and was friends with the DA's wife, which helped her case. Of course, when my mother got back home, she blamed me for everything and sent me a bunch of horrible texts from her other phone number, the one I hadn't blocked. I've been trying my best to ignore them, but I can't stop wondering if what happened was really my fault or not. What Kevin and my mother did to me was really bad, but now I feel like I shouldn't have gotten involved in their mess. What I did was out of anger, and I'm not proud of it. If I knew it would cause such big problems, I would never have sent that screenshot to my mother. I just wanted them to feel bad, but I never meant for anyone to get hurt. My mother has never been violent before, at least not that I know of, so this was new. I never could have imagined what would happen beforehand. I feel awful about everything. My mother keeps trying to make herself the victim and blame me, which makes it even worse. Even Kevin is posting cryptic quotes about betrayal, which is ironic, but that's not the main issue right now. It feels like they're trying to make me the bad guy to avoid taking responsibility. But honestly, I think I messed up my mother and soon-to-be ex-husband's relationship after my mom bragged about stealing my man with an inheritance she doesn't even have. Update 1. Thanks to everyone for being so supportive in the comments. I appreciate all your kind words, especially those praising Gran. She was truly one of a kind, and I feel incredibly lucky to have had her in my life. Having someone like her made up for having a mother like mine. I don't feel guilty anymore about what happened because what I did wasn't that big of a deal. They ruined my marriage, so I ruined their relationship. It's fair game. My mother's the one who lost control and attacked the guy she supposedly loves, so I'm not going to feel bad about that at all. She's the one acting crazy, not me, and she's not going to make me feel like the bad guy when she's the one who messed up. Kevin got hurt, and I do feel sorry for him because violence is never okay, but he's also the guy who cheated on me with our mother. That's just disgusting, and I can't believe he would even think he has the right to ask for forgiveness and come back after doing something like that. He betrayed both me and my mother. I'm sorry he got hurt, but it's not my fault and not my problem either. So I've decided to block them both on every platform. I even blocked my mother on PayPal, so you know I mean business. On a serious note, though, I'm considering getting a restraining order because my mother has lost it. I don't know what she might do next, and if she's mad at me for ruining her relationship, she might come after me. I don't want that, but I also don't want to give up my home and career because of her craziness. So getting a restraining order is the best way for me to protect myself from her. I just hope it doesn't come to that. Update 2. It looks like I might have to go ahead and file for a restraining order after all. I had been ignoring my mother for almost 2 weeks and was starting to move forward. Kevin had also responded to my divorce petition, and he wasn't contesting it, so it seemed like things were getting back on track. With therapy and self-care, I was finally starting to heal from this awful situation. But then my mother decided to come back and cause trouble. Yesterday, I found her waiting for me in my front yard, right outside my door. I had just gotten home from work, and I was not in the mood. I told her to leave or I'd call the police from inside my car, but she refused to move. Instead, she said she wouldn't leave until she talked to me about the inheritance. I told her she could talk to me from a distance because I was curious about what she had to say. She then straightforwardly told me that she wanted half of what I had inherited because it was fair, as Grandma was her mother too, not just mine. I couldn't help but laugh in her face when she brought up fairness. Then I firmly told her to leave because I wasn't giving her anything. I dialed 911 just in case she tried anything funny. She glared at me and started walking towards my car. Instinctively, I rolled up my windows just in time because she kicked the passenger side panel and dented it. I only noticed the dent after I got out of the car, which I didn't do until I saw her drive away. I took photos of the damage for evidence and planned to use the security footage from my house cameras to prove that my mother caused it. I called my lawyer right away to tell her what happened and said I wanted to file a restraining order against my mother, so that's happening now too. It seems like my mother can't stand the idea of a peaceful life and always has to cause trouble. I tried to file a police report, but since she's friends with the DA's wife, the precinct head said he couldn't help. It's okay though because I have the security footage, and she can't change that. I've even backed it up on my laptop to make sure I don't lose it. The next few days are going to be super stressful with all the court trips, but at least I'll finally be rid of these people. Update 3. Hey everyone, things have been hectic lately with the divorce proceedings. We're in the middle of settling things, and it's really frustrating. On the bright side, I got a restraining order against my mother last week, so that's a relief. Kevin and his lawyer are spreading lies, so I'm gathering evidence of his cheating for the next meeting. Hopefully that'll put an end to this mess. It's tough, but I'm going to therapy regularly to manage my anger and emotions. I've realized I don't want to end up like my mom. Just needed to vent for a bit, but I feel better now. I'll be back once the divorce is finalized. Take care for now.